Hi, Hartford Public Library. Let's have some fun with clay. Hello, everyone. This is Justice Michelle Thomas in Artpeace Studio. And today we're going to have some fun with clay. And I'm going to show you how to turn a pinch pot into a music instrument. It's a shaker. And so the beauty of creating with clay and making using pinch pot as the form, it's just a classic form, and it's a way to really get to know clay, get your hands on it, and figure some things out just with your touch. I'm using the pinch pot technique because that develops your sensitivity in your hands when you're working with clay to really feel what the thresholds of the clay can do. And I wanted to create something that was just kind of cool and fun in that you can use it afterwards. So it's form and function. And I start with just a simple air dry clay. This particular clay can be fired, but I want to show you the techniques and the way to create this so that you can buy just, it's very inexpensive air dry clay, and it hardens, and after you paint it, it's, functional, and you don't have to fire it in a kiln or anything like that. This clay can be fired, but you wouldn't use that. And actually this is this shaker was made with air dry clay. So I have some clay, and the consistency of the clay is where when you press it, you can have you kind of indent it. It's not too wet, it's not too dry. It's a very nice, malleable clay. And so I start off with a ball of clay. Originally I had kneaded the clay and got kind of the air bubbles out if I needed to, and then I formed it into just a kind of loose ball. To start a pinch pot with the ball of clay, I just take my thumb and press it into the clay. It doesn't go all the way through, I just press it so that it goes up to the knuckle of my thumb. Now this is the beautiful part of creating a pinch pot. So I use both hands. So this hand, I'm kind of cupping the ball, and I'm always kind of touching it to try to keep a circular shape. These four fingers are the main fingers that, the main tools used to form that pinch pot. And so basically what I'm doing is I'm holding it in my palm, and I'm pressing my four fingers to my thumb. I'm pressing them, and it starts to move the clay. Now I'm able to rotate this on my thumb. You can see it turning. So I use my fingers, this as a brace, and I'm able to turn the clay into my thumb. Now I don't have any nails, so it's not, pushing nail marks into the clay. It's all the pads of my fingers are what's needed. So as I'm pressing the clay, I'm making the walls thinner, and I'm also using my hand as a brace so that my fingers don't go through the clay. And I just keep doing that in a circular motion. Now, when people are doing this for the first time, when they're pressing the clay tends to bow out. It tends to, you form a bowl. So if I were to do this quickly, I could show you how it would, somebody would make a bowl. Well, to make a shaker, instead of a bowl, we want a sphere. So we have to bring those walls in so that it can form a circle. Now to do that takes some time, and you got to kind of feel your way through it. I'm going to show you how to do that, but I'm just letting you know that when you're making the bowl, you have to use a different way of handling the clay to turn it into a sphere. So I could still fix just having a bowl. I could still turn it into that sphere. So here I'm going to start to refine this. I'm pressing with my 4 fingers into my thumb, and I'm actually moving my thumb in this direction as I'm doing it. So I'm I can feel the sensation of the clay in my thumb here. And it's kind of like meditative, because if I close my eyes, I can feel the thickness of the clay. Now, one of the goals is to have the thickness of the clay to get it as thin as possible, as thin as I can get it, and to have it uniform throughout. So the thinness is all the way through, where right now the lip here is very thick and it's thinner down here. So I'm working my way up. I'm using my thumb and my hand. It's like all sensitivity in my thumb pad, my finger pads, and my palm. Those are the points of contact that I'm paying attention to feel the thickness of the walls. I'm turning it because I want the thickness of the walls, of the wall of the sphere, to be uniform. And I'm able to do that by pressing my thumb pad into my fingers, the 4 finger pads, and you can feel how thick it is. And where it's thicker, I'm pressing, and where it's thinner, I'm letting go. So it's a continuous kind of dance. I'm pressing and letting go, and I'm all the while anchoring with this so I don't poke through. This is stopping me from poking through. So now that I feel good about the thickness or the thinness now of the bottom, I want to start working my way up to start creating a sphere. This was one I did earlier where you could see I close it considerably. This is hollow. So now I'm pressing, making sure I'm not pressing the walls out. Now where the clay is thicker, so from here down is thinner, and from here up is thicker. So now I'm going to start from here, and now I'm pressing and turning it around. I'm pressing to thin those walls out. Now I'm doing something a little different. As I press my fingers into my thumb, I'm starting to pull my fingers in an upward motion, because now I want to start forming this shape into a circle, into a sphere. So I have to control and direct the clay where I want it to go. The clay wants to just be pushed out, but I want it to move in a certain direction. I want to turn it into a shape that I want. So I have to control it. So I'm pushing. So I'm going in a circular motion with my thumb on the inside, and my fingers are pushing up. And so now I'm pulling the clay up a little bit, making sure as wherever it's thin to not push too hard. And notice these 4 fingers are now doing this motion, are doing a pulling motion, because I want to close that hole. I want I don't want a bowl shape. I don't want the opening so wide. I want to close that opening. So I begin to literally push those fingers in and push that clay. And you can see the hole is starting to close. Well, now my thumb it's closing. I'm closing the hole pretty good where my thumb is going to have to come out. So I'll do that quickly. I'm still all the while paying attention to how thick the walls are, and if I need to press clay or not. All right, so I have a basic shape, and the hole is closed a little bit. It's not totally a sphere, it's more oval right now, and the walls are still thick. So now I really want to thin the walls out a little more and change the shape. Make sure I have a sphere. So I'm taking my middle finger and the pad on my middle finger, and I'm pressing it against my palm in the clay. That's where I'm feeling how thin or thick the walls are, and I'm able to go in a circular motion to create more of a sphere. And where it's thin, I'm trying not to push too much. And this finger is going in a swooping motion to thin those walls. All the while, there's a lot of sensitivity with clay, because if you're too aggressive, you'll just burst through and you'll defeat the purpose of really controlling that clay. And so there it is. And I'm pushing very gently at this point, because now I just want to change, I just want the shape to change a little bit. So it's kind of gotten, larger. Now I can start closing that hole. This technique is needed to close the hole. So I have more clay that I have to fold in. So I'm literally folding it in. But because I'm trying to make the hole smaller, I'm going to have to pinch some of that together to actually close it. So I'm pushing it in, but then it buckles. So in order to fix that buckle, I have to pinch the clay, that the clay is soft enough and malleable enough to pinch it together. And so that's how I start to close that hole. And you see I can do it fairly quickly. Once I push that clay in, I can pinch, and I'm very sensitive to not having it crush, but just enough so that it starts to close the hole. So my goal here is to close the hole as small as I can while still being able to thin the walls and make my sphere more sphere as opposed to this is more oval. But I think I close that up decently where I can fit my finger in there. As long as I can fit my finger in there, I'm good. And then I start refining to make it smoother. Turning it all the while. Okay, so I'm satisfied with that hole, but I want to change my shape a little bit. So I go ahead and do the same technique of turning it and pushing out, and I'm seeing what kind of shape that I want. Now, we all have made snowballs or hamburger patties. And so this technique is I'm just very lightly pushing on it just to see if I can get the shape to calm down from the oval. I can dictate, I tell the clay what I want it to do. And the clay is soft enough that I can bend it and move clay around to thinner parts, moving from thicker parts to thinner parts, all the while sensitive to not busting through that clay, that wall. And so you can see very quickly, I have a more of a sphere shape. I could even do that more. And now this was done fairly quickly. It would take a little longer to, especially not being used to trying to close that hole and work in the shape and not busting through. There's all these considerations going on that you have to learn and really feeling. So now when I'm just going to use the pad of my thumb and the pad of my middle finger to press and see if the thickness of the walls are uniform. And they're pretty uniform. I mean, I have some thick spots I could thin out. And I'm fairly okay with the shape. I mean, I would spend a lot of time. But that's, a quick view of how that is. Now, some of the refinements that I would do, one, I would take a lot more time in thinning out the walls. And this, the thickness of these walls, if I kept working with this, I could probably get this double the size that it is. That's how thick the walls are. I mean, they're less than 1/4 of an inch. And I would want to make them a lot thinner. It probably would double in size. I've done pitch pots where the walls were very, very thin. It's like I said, meditative. It's hard to get it to that level. So I could just show you quick some of the tools. It's my cat. Some of the tools that I can smooth out, you know, the surface. I have, you know, it's just kind of like a popsicle stick like tool, and very gently I can smooth the surface. Very gently though. The clay is still it's wet, semi-wet. So where the clay, you know, you got to be really careful. Or or I could let it dry for, you know, half of a day and then come back to it and work on something else and come back. But then all I'm doing is smoothing areas that, you know, are buckling or bulging, and I want to smooth them out. So it's just a technique I'm showing. That's one way. Another is I have a metal tool that I could scrape if I needed to. This is a little too wet to do that. Another technique is I could actually use water gently, just on light brush gently. And I could use my fingers to rub, to smooth off the surface. Very gentle. All this is very gentle. I'm able to smooth off the surface, press some of the thicker areas. I could still do my snowball technique to keep the shape. And another thing I could do is have a sponge to smooth the surface as well. And keep working it. I would work it, you know, for some time to the shape and the thickness, all of the things that I considered. So this is the one I did earlier, and it's partially dried. I can take another tool with a smooth surface and do what's called burnishing. I can make the surface itself of the clay shiny, very smooth with these small circular motions, and leave it to dry. So now I'll show you why I have this little hole here. I still needed to have a hole there because in order to make our shakers, I would take some beads and put them inside our shaker, put them inside that hole. And this would be after it's dried, but I'm just showing you that that's where I would put those beads, so that inside you put enough where you'd have it would make a sound. And you can use anything, sand, rocks, anything that's gonna make noise. I think this one has a combination of beads and rice, but anything small enough to go into the hole. Then once this is completely dried, I would say, you know, give it, you know, a few days. You can begin to paint your surfaces and paint it any way you want. I have two examples here. One I just painted pink, and then this one is multicolored design. And where the hole is that we put the beads in, I just cut out a, you know, piece of construction paper or colored paper and glued the hole closed. And once the whole thing is dried, you just glue it closed. You have your shaker. So hopefully this one will be dry in a couple of, you know, maybe a day or so, and I'll begin to paint that one. I'm gonna work this guy because he's still too thick for me. There's some areas that are thick and thin, and I would really spend some time. I spend maybe about, I don't know, a couple hours just, you know, kind of in a meditative state. I kind of close my eyes and I just press the clay and try to make it as uniform as possible and as thin as possible. and just really paying attention to that sensitivity. So that's my pinch pot musical shaker. And I hope you enjoyed that. Artpeace Studio. Peace.